Welcome. This is Everyday Paradoxes Tiny Truths About Becoming, a 16-part audio series based on my book. These are reflections on the quiet contradictions that shape our growth. I'm Leslie DeMello. In each episode, we'll sit with one small truth from ordinary life, where psychology meets contemplation and insight becomes practice. Let's begin. Chapter 12, The Freedom of Being Understood by Yourself. This looks at inner validation, self compassion, and the quiet end of the need to prove ourselves. Starting with a short story, there was this person who was very good at explaining themselves. So, if there was a misunderstanding, they clarified. If there was tension, they smoothed the tension. If someone looks confused, they filled in the gaps. They could replay conversations in their head for hours, editing sentences that had already been spoken, kind of imagining how they should have been understood. And one day, they said almost tiredly, almost feeling exhausted, I just want people to see me clearly. And then after a pause, he said, but I don't know if I see myself clearly anymore. And that was the moment something shifted for him. Because what he was really exhausted from wasn't being misunderstood, it was trying to exist inside other people's minds. And that's where this chapter begins. Exhaustion of explanation. Many of us don't realize how much energy we spend trying to be understood. And this often looks like explaining your tone after you've already spoken, or justifying your boundaries so that they seem reasonable to the other person, clarifying your intentions even when you were sincere, softening your truth so that it's easier to be received, and worrying about how you came across instead of how you felt. Some ways that we spend energy trying to be understood. And we keep doing this. Over the period of time, this becomes emotional labor. And not because there's something wrong in explaining, but because it teaches us something dangerous. And what does it teach us? My experience isn't real unless someone else confirms it. Over explaining, that's what it tends to teach us. It teaches us that my experience isn't real unless someone else confirms it. And that can be exhausting. Because no matter how carefully we explain, no matter how carefully we explain, we cannot control how we are perceived. We end up editing ourselves endlessly. And we end up editing ourselves for audiences who are probably not even listening deep enough. So my experience isn't real unless someone else confirms it. This is what we have been teaching ourselves. Anyone heard of the proving loop? The proving loop. And you might recognize this in yourself. You replay a conversation in your mind long after it's over. You think about what you said. You think about what you meant. You think about how it might have landed. Or if someone misunderstands you. And and you feel strangely unsettled. Not really angry, but you just feel off. Or maybe you notice yourself explaining a little too much when you're questioned, clarifying things that you don't really need to clarify, simply wanting to make sure that the other person gets you, that the other person understands you. Or there's that urge to set that record straight, to fix how you're being seen, to make sure that your attentions are clear, to be 100% sure that they are not misunderstanding you. And sometimes it even looks like shrinking parts of yourself, softening your words, holding back an edge, just so that you won't be misread. And this will be familiar to a lot of us. And if this is familiar to you, it does not mean that we are insecure. It simply means that our nervous system is looking for safety. We simply want to feel safe. And somewhere along the way, somewhere as we were growing up, it learned, we learned, or it learned that safety came from being understood. It was a strategy that we learned. So, what are we really chasing? What are we really chasing? When we are chasing understanding in the sense that I spoke of earlier, if we are chasing understanding, we are rarely chasing agreement. When we chase understanding, we are rarely chasing agreement. We are chasing relief. The relief of being seen as we see ourselves. The relief of not being misjudged. The relief of knowing that we make sense. And the irony, the paradox, is that no amount of external understanding can can give us the peace that comes from understanding ourselves. Because misunderstanding, it hurts the most when it echoes an inner doubt. Misunderstanding hurts the most when it echoes an inner doubt. When we don't fully trust our own knowing, other people's perceptions feel destabilizing. When we don't trust, when we don't fully trust our own knowing, other person's perceptions feel destabilizing. You all heard about that man asking for directions. So a man stopped 10 people to ask for directions. And each one of them, they pointed a different way. And with every answer, he grew more and more confused. And finally, someone asked him, "Where are you trying to go?" He paused. "I'm not sure," he said. No direction ever feels right when you don't know your own destination. No direction ever feels right when you don't know your own destination. Inner validation. Anyone familiar with this term? Inner validation. And it's a term in psychology for what we're talking about here. And it's much simpler than it sounds. What is inner validation? It's that quiet, steady place inside you that can say, "I know what I meant, I know how I feel, and I know where I am coming from." That's inner validation. And not in a defensive way, not in an argumentative way, and definitely not in an arrogant way. Just calmly, just calmly. I know what I meant, I know how I feel, and I know where I am coming from. Inner validation doesn't mean that you stop listening to other people. It doesn't mean you stop caring about feedback or perspective. It means you stop handing over the final say about your reality. You can hear someone's opinion without collapsing inside. It is possible. You can be misunderstood without spiraling. You can stay soft without explaining yourself until you're exhausted. And that's not indifference. That's definitely not shutting down. That's simply self trust. And self trust is what lets you stay connected to yourself even when the world doesn't fully understand you. Hearing someone's opinion without collapsing inside, letting yourself be misunderstood without spiraling, and staying soft without explaining yourself until you're exhausted. Self trust. I once heard about someone who kept asking others, was I wrong? He kept asking others, was I wrong? So they asked friends, they asked family, they asked people who barely knew them. And one day, someone finally asked them, do you think you were wrong? And they paused. I don't know, they said. I never asked myself. And sometimes peace doesn't come from better answers, it comes from asking a different question. Comes from asking a different question. So, self understanding, understanding ourselves, this is what changes everything. And here's how things start to feel different when you understand yourself a little more deeply. Someone misunderstands you, and yes, you still feel it. And you might feel a flicker of annoyance or you might feel disappointment, but it doesn't knock you off your feet. So, someone misunderstands you and it doesn't knock you off your feet. Someone criticizes you, and instead of reacting right away, you pause. You check in with yourself first and you decide whether there's something useful there or not. You decide. Someone projects their stuff onto you. And for once, you don't rush to clean it up or to correct the story. You let it sit where it belongs. And sometimes someone just doesn't get you. And you notice something surprising. You know what? I'm okay with that. They don't get me, and I'm okay with that. And none of this means that you stopped caring. And it definitely doesn't mean that you've become detached or that you've gone cold. It simply means that you know who you are. And when you know who you are, you have somewhere to stand. Even when the ground around you feels a little shaky, when you know who you are, you have somewhere to stand. Even when the ground around you feels shaky. So let me put in a prompt. If you're journaling, you can journal on this prompt. And if you're reflecting, just spend a moment or so reflecting on it. Where do I feel the need to explain myself most? And we all do it. We all explain ourselves. Where do you feel the need to explain yourself the most? So, following up to that prompt, what am I hoping, or what are you hoping that that explanation will give you? What are you hoping that that explanation will give you? So, where do you feel the need to explain yourself the most, and what are you hoping that that explanation will give you? So, understanding ourselves. As we keep on understanding ourselves better, something starts to shift. Inside of us, something starts to shift. We don't feel the same need to defend ourselves all the time. And it's not because we've stopped caring, it's simply because we are now clearer. We start to notice the difference between feedback that's actually useful and projection that belongs to someone else. We are able to know the difference between misunderstanding and what we know is true, between someone else's story about you and your own lived reality. And when you can tell the difference, we realize that we don't have to react so quickly. We don't have to explain ourselves into exhaustion. We don't have to harden. We don't have to pull away. And it's not emotional shutdown anymore. It's emotional maturity. It's a quiet confidence. It is the confidence from knowing that's what's yours, or rather is the confidence that comes from knowing what's yours and what isn't yours to tend to. And simply when we are able to have that clarity, we are able to be more compassionate. Firstly, compassionate towards ourselves, because now I've stopped attacking myself. Every time someone misunderstands me, I stop attacking myself. And as I start extending compassion towards myself, I start extending compassion towards others. Because you can see that their reactions, they often have more to do with them than with you. Their reactions were never about you in the first place. Their reactions were always about them. And clarity softens the need for defense. And in that softness, there is a lot of freedom. A small practice that we can do now, a small practice, and I call this practice holding your own gaze. And before we move into this practice, and it's a very short practice, moving before we move into this practice, just something important, that understanding yourself doesn't mean that you have everything figured out. It doesn't mean having the perfect explanation for who you are or why you feel the way you do. Because most of us, we don't need more insight. What we need is more kindness toward the insight that we already have. We simply need more kindness. And this practice isn't about analyzing yourself or getting clarity all at once, but rather it's about offering yourself the same steady presence that you so often offer to others. So rather than asking, can I explain myself well enough? We are asking something much simpler. So let's try this together. Place a hand on your chest and ask yourself, do I understand myself enough to stay with myself? Do I understand myself enough to stay with myself? And this doesn't need to be perfect, it doesn't need to be complete. Just enough. Do I understand myself enough? Enough so that I can stay with myself. And let that enough be sufficient. We'll now go into a guided meditation. And I've titled this meditation Being Seen from the Inside. So if it feels comfortable, gently close your eyes or soften your gaze and let your body settle in the way it wants to settle. You don't need to sit perfectly. You don't need to hold yourself upright. Let your body settle in the way it wants to settle. Take a slow breath in through the nose. Let it out through the mouth. Take another slow breath in through the nose. And let it out through the mouth. One more time, slow breath in through the nose and let it out through the mouth. There's nothing you need to explain here, nothing you need to justify, and nothing you need to make sense of for anyone else. You're allowed to arrive without translating yourself. And start to notice where your attention usually goes. Try to notice how often it moves outward toward how you're being perceived, how you're coming across, whether you're being understood. And notice this outward movement of attention. Notice this habit without judging it. It learned how to protect you. Now, for these moments, invite your attention to turn inward. Invite your attention to turn inward, not sharply, not forcefully, like turning toward a familiar room. Bring awareness to your breath, the natural rise, the natural fall. Bring awareness to your body, the weight of your body, the meeting points of your body and the surface that it is resting on, the quiet sensations that you feel in your body. Let your system know that you don't need to monitor anyone right now. And now imagine something simple. Imagine the room, the area around you slowly emptying. Not dramatically, not emotionally. Just have the sense that there is no audience here. No one to impress, no one to convince, no one to clarify things for. Even the imagined voices in your head, the ones that ask, did that make sense? Was that okay? What do they think? Even those voices are allowed to rest. There's no performance required, just presence. And now imagine sitting with yourself, sitting with yourself, not as a project, not as someone to figure out, just sitting. Notice what it feels like to be with yourself. Be with yourself without needing to explain your feelings, your choices, your story. If discomfort arises, that's okay. You're not trying to get rid of it. You're simply staying. And this is what self understanding feels like. Not certainty, but companionship. And now, gently, not as affirmations, but as quiet acknowledgements, offer yourself these words. I know who I am. I know my heart. I don't need to prove anything. And notice if something softens even slightly. You're not convincing yourself, you're remembering. And now imagine misunderstandings. Imagine misunderstandings as distant sounds like traffic far away, or voices in another room. They exist, but they don't need your attention. They don't define you. They don't need to respond. You can let them pass without following them. Rest in the quiet space underneath. This is what it feels like to be understood by yourself. And notice what remains when you stop explaining, when you don't explain anymore. Not emptiness, but enoughness. A quiet sense that this is sufficient. You don't need to arrive anywhere else. You don't need to be clearer, more worded, or more acceptable. Just here. Rest. And slowly start to notice the area that you're in, the sounds around you, the temperature of the room that you're in. Take a gentle breath in, let it out slowly. And when you're ready, if your eyes were closed, you can open your eyes. So you don't have to be understood. You don't have to be fully understood to be real. And when you understand yourself, when we understand ourselves, that's where we can rest. And when we stop trying to be understood by everyone, something very surprising happens. We start to feel more seen. And it's not because people suddenly have started agreeing, but because we are no longer abandoning ourselves. We've stopped translating our soul and we've started to live from it. And maybe you don't need to explain yourself so much anymore. Maybe you already make sense to you. Let your own understanding be enough. Let your own compassion be the place that you land. You don't have to be fully understood to be real. Simply, we need to stop hiding from our own gaze. And that, as we do it quietly, as we do it gently, as we keep doing it, that is freedom. Thank you for listening. This has been Everyday Paradoxes, Tiny Truths About Becoming. Before you move on, you might sit quietly with these questions. What did I recognize in myself today? Where is this paradox quietly at work in my life? And what is one small shift I'm being invited toward? Becoming rarely announces itself. It unfolds in awareness, in small recognitions, in the gentle courage to see clearly. This series is based on my book Everyday Paradoxes, Tiny Truths About Becoming. It's a reflective guide meant to be read slowly, not for answers, but for insights that deepen with time. You'll find the reflection questions in the description along with details about the book. If this conversation resonated, you're welcome to like, share, or subscribe so these truths can reach others who may need them. Until next time, stay present, stay curious, and keep becoming.